Okay, well, Jenny, thank you again for joining us virtually. You'll be off having fun in Europe when the webinar is going on. So thank you so much for taking time ahead of that. And you and I spoke once a little while ago, and I learned a bit about lumber traders, but I would love to just start at the beginning for folks listening. Just if you could tell us the story of like what was the employee ownership journey for lumber traders?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, first off. So Lumber Traders has been an ESOP since 2004. Prior to that, we had a couple of owners, Arnold and Debbie Schouten, who had run the company for about 20 years, and they were looking to retire. So they were looking at different options for their exit strategy. And of course, there were companies who were interested in acquiring, but we've got two businesses in the same town. So it's a little bit of a smaller area, and most of them were interested in closing one of them. And Arnold and Debbie really wanted to protect the employees' jobs. And also the businesses, one has been around since 1906 and the other since 1960. So they were really established in the community. So as they're trying to figure out what their plans are, they discovered the ESOP model. And they started looking into that and they said, well, this is really kind of a win-win. They can get paid for building up the company and all the work they did, and they can pass that legacy on to the employees. So ultimately that is what they did. So 2004 it switched over. They did sign on the bank loan as well, because sometimes that's a little tricky to get the financing necessary
Sure.
for that, but they were willing to be involved so they could make it happen for the employees. So that's kind of the journey that we went on to get to where we are today. And that's now 20 years. We're celebrating 20 years as an ESOP.
That's so exciting. And I think if I remember right, you weren't there from the beginning, right? You tell you kind of your story. Like, how did you start at the company and what do you do now?
Yeah, so I started at the company I think 8 years ago now. Um, Initially, I had moved to the area and I had a pretty good history in the building materials industry. I just wanted to change in my career. I came on as retail sales manager just to get my foot in the door, and very quickly, within about 6 months, moved into the store manager position. And from there, I thought, okay, this is probably where I'm going to be for a while. And then our CEO kind of unexpectedly announced that he was going to be leaving. And we have been doing a lot of work culturally and education around the ESOP. I know we'll talk about that as well. And we really wanted to make sure that we kept on that track. So the board interviewed me for the position. I started out as interim for 6 months and then full CEO after that, and that was just about 5 years ago now. So very unexpected. And also, I should add, I had no idea what an ESOP was when I started. They asked
Right.
me, "Are you familiar?" And I said, "I've never heard of that."
Right.
So it was a learning journey for me as well, but it was very exciting to see the benefits and see the impact that that had as well.
Yeah, and we could talk about the education piece because you and I talked about that before, and I would love to just kind of describe that to everybody that it seemed like, if I remember correctly, what you said is that people didn't really get it. They thought maybe it was like a scam or like, there was like some suspicion, if anything, like it wasn't on people's minds. And I'm curious to hear about the like before and after from before you were really focusing on employee education. And then now that you have, like, how do people understand what does it mean to be like an employee, stock ownership, participant? Like, what does that mean to people there? How do you guys, make that sink in to folks who are working at Lumber Traders?
Yeah, people ask, how does it work? And when it's working well, it's great, right? You've got employees who are invested in the performance of the business because it helps them for their retirement. When you're not doing it well or doing it right or educating people, it's a massive expense, and it's difficult. And like you alluded to, people at the time when I came on, a lot of people, and I should back up, people fill in the gaps, right?
Right.
If they don't understand something, they're going to answer it in their heads. And that's a very human thing. And we need to
Right.
know that people are going to be that way. So people had thought it was some kind of pyramid scheme or Ponzi scheme for the old owners who
Right.
only did right by the employees. So it was like
Right. Right.
terrible
Right.
that people have a negative view of this thing. So we really had to start with education and sharing with the employees what it looks like, how it works, why we went this model, why the former owners went this direction,
Hmm.
and get them to understand that. And another thing that we did was the statements that we got from our plan administrator were very vague and
Yeah.
didn't really, they had no historical information, no projection. If you have a 401k or investment portfolio, you always see, where have I been, where am I going,
Hmm. Hmm.
and what's the potential future return. And obviously there's questions about potential future because you don't know what that future holds. But we redid our statements and to be able to show what this benefit has done. And furthermore, another big part of the education is when people enter the plan, there's a time period to enter the plan and then a vesting period.
Hmm.
And to be able to show them, while you don't have anything on paper today, this is where you're going, this is the path. And that really flipped it from a negative, frankly, at
Yeah.
this, to
Wow.
being something very positive. And that rolls into retention and recruitment, and keeping those people who are really involved and really care about the business working here, because it's a challenging labor market, right?
Yeah.
People have
Yeah.
choices, and attracting new people. I know we'll talk a little bit. Maybe I'm jumping the shark a
No, go
little bit.
for it. Yeah, go right into that.
So one big thing that we launched, now this is going on the second full year. We have a new department, we call it Glassworks, and it is an installed glass department. By the way, I probably should mention we are two lumberyard home centers in Port Angeles, Washington. So kind of like a miniature Home Depot, if you will.
Hmm.
And we didn't have installed glass. And I had reached out to a former coworker of mine who I knew he wasn't terribly happy at the company he was working at installing glass. And there was only one other local competitor to them who was closing down. So I reached out and just said, "Hey, how's it going? Are things a bit crazy?" He said, "You have no idea."
Hmm.
I said, "Hey, I'd love to chat." And so we got together and we chatted. And he said that he was thinking about starting his own company, leaving with four of the guys there. And I said, "Oh man, it's tough to start a new business. What if you came under our umbrella? You know the business, right? I'm
Hmm.
not an expert on the glass business. Bring your team, you can run it, you can be a part of our company and have our backing. And we have this awesome thing called an ESOP." So I was able to show him and give to him to pass on to his three other guys what this looked like over the next 10 years and what that benefit would be. And that was absolutely key for getting them to come on
Cool.
board with us. And this last year, we did just shy of $2 million of revenue in that department with fantastic margins as well. And the employees are so happy and
That's
they
cool.
see where this is going, the impact that they're having, and what that looks like for their future. So huge win for us. And honestly, without the ESOP, it probably wouldn't have happened.
I was curious when you are recruiting people, what's your like two-sentence elevator pitch for the ESOP? Like, how do you describe that so that people get it right away and that they understand and it's not like a obscure thing for them?
That's a challenge. Two sentences.
Yeah.
Um, I think really it comes down to, we're an employee-owned company, and an
Hmm.
ESOP is essentially a retirement fund. But unlike a 401k, and most people are familiar with that, you don't have to put in a dime. You
Hmm.
just get the shares for working at the company. But the really cool thing is, if you own Microsoft shares, you hope Microsoft goes up.
Right.
You have no power, right? You can buy a Windows computer, but that's not really gonna make a difference on that share price. So the cool thing with an ESOP is you're affecting that share value, which is
Hmm.
ultimately your own retirement and everybody else at the company. So everybody else is working for each other and trying to make that better as well. So if you want to be able to have a controlling interest in your financial future, this is an incredible benefit.
That's a great pitch. I love it. I think that's a really good summary. And, do you share with people or would you be open to sharing like with this audience, what does it mean to the average like new hire to participate in the ESOP and what does it mean for an average like 15-year employee or someone who's like more established at the company? Like what does that difference mean to them?
So we just had our company meeting where we went over the new share value with everybody. And I want to say that the average employee, so there are some very long-term employees and higher wage earners get more shares as well because
Mm.
you get it based on your percentage of payroll. But the average employee, the increase in share value and additional shares that they were given just in this last year was about $13,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big chunk of change. And
Yeah.
obviously that includes people who just entered the plan as well as
Yeah.
someone who's been here a while.
Yeah.
So the longer you're in it, the more that increase in share value affects your portfolio or your total balance.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I we had several employees who made more on the increase in their share value and shares they received than they did in compensation for the year.
Wow. Yeah.
So it just keeps
Huge,
growing.
huge. Yeah. Especially considering that, I don't know what your workforce is like exactly, but a lot of folks who are working in your industry don't even have retirement savings,
Yes.
right? Let alone a retirement increase that would be more than their annual wage. It's huge.
And I do want to just mention too, because we need to be a little careful with ESOPs because it is a massive benefit. And sometimes, our board is wonderful. So I'm not calling them out in a negative way at all. But sometimes we lean too heavy on it and say, well, we have the ESOP.
Right, right, right.
Well, our wages need to be competitive, but we
Yeah,
have the ESOP. And it's like, yes, and the ESOP doesn't put money on, put food on the table. It doesn't
right.
pay for rent.
Yeah.
So it does have to be a balance between the long-term benefit for the employees, but still offering them compelling reasons to be there because it's challenging times right now.
Yeah. 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 Every dollar matters for so many people right now. I was kind of curious going back to the former owners. I remember you saying that you see them relatively frequently. You have like a relationship with them. What do you think that like if you could share, what do you think it feels like to them to have chosen this path? Like, do you think that you said that part of the meaning for them was like making sure that these facilities didn't close, that they didn't want someone from the outside to like come in or like move it. Do you feel like they um are getting, I guess, value from choosing this way of selling, or do you think that it makes them feel proud? I don't know. I'm gonna put words in your mouth. Like, what do
Yeah.
you think that they feel about it?
No, I think it's a huge legacy for them, and a point of pride, not in a negative sense, but a good way that they've left their fingerprints. And I should also mention, both of the former owners, husband and wife, are on our board of directors. Arnold is the chairman of our board, so they're still involved in the company. Additionally, when we went through the financial crisis, the 08, 09, that
Yeah.
period, we were in a rough place and they actually came back and helped run the company for free. They did not take any
Hmm.
compensation just to help us kind of weather that. And unfortunately, it was kind of some poor management that
Hmm.
resulted in that being necessary. So it's not always needed. Um, from my standpoint, it was amazing. This was my first time, is my first time as a CEO,
Hmm.
but knowing that they're still involved and they're still on the board and they're still a resource for me to go to and ask questions or get feedback. And they do a really good job of not being overly hands on, but
Hmm.
they're there and they just want the success of the business. I'm fortunate I actually play volleyball with them once or twice a week during the summertime as well. So they're just fantastic people. It's such an amazing legacy. It's not just passing off the business to some corporate entity or
Right,
something like
right,
that.
right.
It's continuing to make a difference in their community. And I think they're very proud of that. And we're very thankful for them for that as well.
Yeah, and I think could you share the numbers again? I think you told me when the business converted to an ESOP, what was the employee count and then what is it now? Like how much has it grown in terms of employees since it changed over?
I think, and I'm going off the top of my head here, I think there were around 45 employees when it converted, and we were doing something in the vicinity of $12 million a year annually. Now we have 65 employees and we're right around 21, $22 million in revenue. So it's grown pretty dramatically since that time. the share value, just quick math, is something around 6 times what it was when we
That's
started out.
amazing. Yeah.
So we've averaged 16% per year growth, and that includes going through that 2008 kind
Wow.
of dip that we had and back out the other end.
That's amazing. And then just thinking back to your employees, if they were in the stock market for the last 10 years or whatever, they wouldn't have seen a 16% return. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you can only get with a private company that's doing really well. The owners already, they don't have any kind of financial relationship with it. Like the debt is paid off to them at this point. So they're on the board because they want to be,
Yeah.
not as like debt holders, right? They're
Correct. And we do pay per board meeting for the
hmm
board members, but it's a very small amount for what
hmm
it is. So it really is that they care and they want to be involved. They don't have any financial stake in the business other than just wanting to see it succeed for the sake of the businesses.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's so thrilling for them because as a business owner, I can only imagine, you're handing over this baby and you don't want to see it struggle or, close or have something you know, happen with it. You want to see it succeed. So it probably feels so good to them to come in and, see that there's more people, there's more revenue, there's new things happening. It's probably exciting. Um, do you have advice? So, you're kind of in the ESOP model. You're probably not as familiar with like a co-op or the employee ownership trust, other things that project equity does. But just thinking of like employee ownership sale versus other types of exit opportunities, do you have anything that you would want to offer to owners who are like considering an employee ownership path?
I think most owners, they care very much about the community that their business is in. And the strength of small business and keeping things local and keeping those dollars rotating through our communities rather than just
Yeah.
exiting
Yeah.
is huge and massively impactful. Unfortunately, one of our competitors down the road just sold to an investment company.
Wow.
Like, okay, well, good. The people get to keep their jobs. That's good. And all those profit dollars are leaving the community,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right.
So the impact of it is huge. And while it may be a little more complicated to set up an ESOP, especially for a first time, realistically, you can get the same sale price. You should probably be able to get the same sales price. And there are some
hmm
things, if owners are willing to help out with the financing or underwrite a loan or something like that, that does help because that's a little sticky sometimes with the bank.
hmm
But it really can be that win-win where the owner is getting what they're due. They worked hard, they built a business, a successful business, so they should get rewarded for that,
Right.
and they can get that and pass that on to the employees, which is absolutely huge. And we want to grow our business, and we're looking at potential acquisitions and things like that too. And I think that's such a strong story to where employees can right away jump in and be getting those kind of huge benefits. And
hmm
again, the owner still gets paid out. It's not win lose. It really
Right.
is a win-win scenario.
Right. Right. Well, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would want to share, or any other kind of like stories that you think might be helpful for people listening?
Oh boy. One thing that you mentioned, if people had invested in the stock market, the key there too is that they would have to invest in that. And that's the beauty of the ESOP. There's not any employee requirement to put in their own money. This is
Right.
just being put in for them, and such a huge benefit. Um, and again, I would just emphasize it does take work, it does take training and education for employees to make it really be that win-win scenario. Um, and trying to remind them throughout the year, once a year is not sufficient. It really
hmm
does take that step. But like so many things in life, the best things are things that take effort, right?
That's true.
It's worth the investment in that time and that energy. And it is such a beautiful legacy for the community, for the employees. I couldn't be happier or more proud than I am working for an ESOP. It's been incredibly rewarding for me as well.
Oh my gosh. Well, that is a lovely note to end on. Danny, thank you so much for sharing your story and the lumber traders story. It's really cool. I think it can be inspiring to other people to just see another business and kind of like what their journey has been, especially one, that's been like the last 20 years. It's really cool.
Mhm. And by the way, I'm perfectly willing if you want to share my contact information. I could talk about ESOPs all day, every day. It's a passion of mine. If anyone has questions, you're thinking about it, or if somebody has one and you want to improve, we can all learn from each other, and I'm more than happy to have discussions or share any information as well.
That's super generous. Thank you so much. Okay. All right.